Okay, I hope this is recording. Hello, everyone. My name is Ruth Alfino. I'm a prevention educator. As you can see, it says Barbara Spreckman there, but that's just because I had to host the meeting today. And today we are going to be talking about signs to know if your kid is using and what to do if they are. And I know that it's an interesting topic, but it is also something that is very sensitive to parents. And there are a lot of different emotions attached to parents when they're talking about their children using substances. So we'll start to get into that and how to mitigate some of those emotions and hopefully turn something that may be traumatic towards the family into something that is manageable and easily overcome. So why this presentation? I always start off my presentations this way. This is not to scare you. This is to inform you. And once again, this is not a parenting class. You are the best parent for your child. You know them best. I am just giving you information, something that's evidence informed and a lot of evidence-based information so that you are able to come out of this with the perspective that you can do this. And I think that's important. Oh, wait, sorry, it's letting someone in. So we are talking about my perspective. My approach is shaped by my learning experience. And my learning experience is that I am, and we'll go there, I'm a prevention educator. I'm certified in life skills training. I have a TEFL and a BA in global studies, American studies, and political science. I sort of went overboard in college. I actually adopted two children when I was 19. They're my nieces. They're middle school and pre-adolescent. And this particular one, I'm going to be talking a little bit, not much, about family members who are abusing substances in my family in particular, so that maybe you know that you're not alone, but also knowing that this is something that happens in every family. Sometimes it's just unavoidable. Sometimes these things just occur. And I am not in the mindset of someone who has abused substances, but I do know what it's like to be around them and around family members that do use them. This does inform the presentation, but it is not the main point of the presentation. So I just want to say that moving forward. So what may your children come across? There are quite a few things. This is based around life that is and was. There are still opportunities for substance abuse and use in this day and age, regardless of whether or not we're still in lockdowns or in COVID times. Computers, a lot of things can happen, bullying online. Some students may feel isolated and ostracized. There's also subtle advertising that you may find interesting, and we will get into that in a later Let's Have a Conversation series, but we will be talking about that. So if anyone has any questions about that. Subtle advertising in general happens on sites and with influencers when they use products that they say, oh, I've been using this. Oh, I've been drinking this kind of juice. This is something that I really like, right? And influencers are part of that grander conversation on how much can people say and what can they listen to when they're being influenced. Next is peer pressure from their social groups. A lot of students and children face peer pressure from places that they think would be safe for them. So for example, a friend group and possibly a friend that is using or abusing drugs, and that could be something that is very detrimental to them and sort of breaks their trust in their social group. Also, modeled behavior at home. This is something that I sort of had trouble putting on actually, because model behavior at home means quite a few things. It means that you are just casually drinking a beer in front of them. Maybe you're just, walking by with a cocktail, something like that. So all this modeled behavior also depends on how the alcohol is presented, right? So for example, if you have a mother that says, oh, I'm so stressed, I'm gonna go drink, and they drink in the dining room table and drink a whole bottle of wine in one sitting, that usually means that there are some deeper problems there. But if children see that, they start to associate stress relief with alcohol. And that's just sort of the modeled behavior that they may see. But on the other side of the spectrum, modeled behavior can also mean that you are drinking responsibly, that you have 1 drink or 2 drinks at a holiday party, and your spouse or significant other decides to drive instead of you, or you guys take a taxi home, something like that. So those are all parts that sort of encompass model behavior. We also have genetic predispositions. Does substance abuse run in the family? Do substance abuse disorders run in your family? And that's a conversation that my parents and myself had recently about alcoholism actually running in our family, and that being a part of some of the health issues that other people in my family had experienced. And being honest with those things, because if there is a genetic predisposition to being addicted to something in particular, then that means that there should be more caution when proceeding with that substance, right? So I do have a video on teens and drug use. That is something that I think that it's just good to share and good to know. So I will be sharing that video. Excuse me, the bar is getting in the way. My apologies. All right, so there's this one, which we will be talking about later. And it won't let me, okay. All right, so here's this. I wanna make sure that you can hear everything. Let's make sure. Okay, here we go.
Understanding substance use and abuse. Misuse of substances like alcohol and drugs is a growing problem in the U.S., and teens and young adults are most at risk, with half of all new drug users being under the age of 18, and 1 in 5 high school students having abused prescription drugs. Additionally, 1/3 of high school students currently use alcohol, 23% use marijuana, and 22% use all forms of tobacco combined. Decision-making in teens involves a chemical called dopamine in the brain's reward center. Dopamine helps transmit signals in the brain that make people feel happy. The number of brain receptors interacting with dopamine is higher in adolescence than at any other time of life. That means that when a teen is exposed to a reward, such as a compliment, the reward center reacts more strongly than it would for an adult. Also, being with friends increases the sensitivity to rewards and makes the already sensitive reward system even more sensitive. Feeling rewards more strongly and responding more intensely to what peers may think means that there are biological reasons for why teens sometimes decide to do things with their friends that they would never do on their own. This can be positive by encouraging friends to take on new challenges, but it can also lead to dangerous decisions, such as drug and alcohol use. Drug use and abuse can contribute to harmful short and long-term health risks. In fact, drug abuse can have long-term effects on a developing teenage brain. MRI scans of the brain have shown that people who have been using drugs for a long time have a smaller prefrontal cortex than people who have not been using drugs. The prefrontal cortex is the area where decision-making occurs. Drug use can result in poor grades, memory loss, and social problems. A lot of us have an idea about what a person dependent on drugs looks like. However, anyone can suffer from this type of addiction. Addiction doesn't depend on income, job, age, race, or color. It is a disease of the brain that can happen to anyone. Drug dependency is when a person consumes alcohol or drugs regularly, despite the fact that it causes issues in their life and relationships with others. Get help if you need it. Encourage your friends to get help too. If you or someone you love is struggling with drug use or abuse, call 1-800-662-HELP or visit www.easyread.drugabuse.gov.
Okay, so that is something that we did want to share. So yeah, that is something I really like that video just because it does so heavily talk about, you know, the brain chemistry and the things going on in teens. And also that teenagers wouldn't do things on their own usually. It's some sort of a pack mentality, and the decision making is sort of hindered throughout their life because they do have some of these decision making skills that aren't developed yet, right? So it's just a really interesting video to me. So I will give the link to that for anyone that would like it. And also, I do want to talk about something before your kids are using, before something like this does happen. Having meals with the family when you can is very important. Prevention is key. So there are all parts of prevention that we can sort of place in here. Prevention also meaning that they have a good school life, that they have and they have good friends, that they're able to be in an environment that is nurturing and able to have those types of sort of nuanced conversations that are sort of wishy-washy in their opinions, because they still need to form those opinions. They still need to make decisions on those things. And if you're not able to have a conversation about sort of rounding out the edges of what your opinions and information is, then that's just it. It needs to happen. There are very few points that are made poignantly that don't need sort of some fleshing out, right? So having meals with the family when you can is a really big one. Here is a post from here is a news article from the Washington Post. It does talk about something that happened they did a study in 2015. So it has been 5 years, but it still is, I thought it was very well informed and a study that was done very well. So sort of what it talks about is in one study of more than 5,000 students from Minnesota, they had found, excuse me, I just want to get the numbers correct, 5,000 Minnesota teens, researchers concluded that if they had regular family meals with their guardians and their family, then they had lower rates of depression and suicidal thoughts. So I thought that was really interesting. And in a recent study, teenagers who had been victims of cyberbullying bounced back more readily if they had regular family meals. And I believe, and I sort of want to reiterate, that it's because hard conversations can happen at family dinners. So if you are talking to them and treating them as if they answer questions and not assuming that they are using something if they ask questions about it, if they start having questions about sex, maybe informing them on things that are useful to them at their age, their appropriate ages, then it helps inform their opinions to make better decisions. There could be questions about drugs and alcohol and vices and peer pressure and all of that. And those are things that, because we are adults, we've been through them, and sharing our experiences in an age-appropriate way could be very helpful for them to understand what it is they're going through, but also know that you've been through it too, and you're on the other side of it. So even if they feel like there's no end in sight, you're a living example of those kinds of conversations to happen. And it also they also reiterate in the study that children who have ready available conversations with their parents, then that also means that they are able to expand their vocabularies. And on average, I believe it said there are about 3,000 more words that children can use outside of their regular peer groups that adults make and converse in and introduce to children, because we just happen to know bigger words because we've lived longer, we've gone through more schooling, things like that. So they are able to use those words and actually become more well thought out people and fleshed out into a well-adjusted individual when they are able to have words to the feelings that they feel. Also being a part of their lives as much as you can. I know for me, my two nieces are involved in copious amounts of soccer. It does lead to a lot of cold game nights, but it is also something that they're just really proud of, and we try to attend as many soccer games as possible. Any extracurriculars that they are involved in, going to their plays, going to their robotics competitions, anything like that, anything they're interested in, anything they're good at. It just shows that you're willing to invest in them, that they're a good investment, that they are, they deserve your time, and it's already given, and it's not something that should be earned. And if you just go without the feeling of needing to earn someone's attention, then I think that there's much less of a give and take, less of a reward system that kind of happens, right? So if they say, oh, it's already given, mom and dad, or, whoever's going to be there, then that's important to them. That's something that you will always be stable for them in that way. And I think that's that's something that should always be around, right? So also pay attention to how they may be acting differently. Any abnormal habits, monitoring them and following up. You know your child better than anyone else because you've been around them for so long. This could be anything, including on the computer or in their life. This could be a number of things children are considering. As they are developing and as their formative years are coming around, they are growing older, learning new things every day. And because they are learning new things every day, it can be overwhelming. It's different for us where we sort of have all of our knowledge and our brains are formed and we're learning new things, but not at the rate that students are, not at the rate that children are, because we kind of have the basics already. They're still learning the basics, which can sometimes be overwhelming due to many different reasons, but that's essentially what it is, right? So while they are overloaded on certain parts of life, home is a safe haven. Home is a space where they can explore who they are, where they can explore who they are without judgment, and where they are still learning, but processing that learning as they go. So during these formative years, it's the core of what their being comes in, core of who they are. So if you see any sorts of weird sort of amalgamations of what is, what could be, all those sorts of things, just being aware of what is and what isn't, and if it changes day to day. Sometimes teens just have hormones and are sort of unable to express themselves effectively because of a number of reasons. So just making sure that if anything truly is abnormal, to just follow up with that. So I did sort of I wanted to jump from prevention is key to accountability, right? So you sort of have two spectrums where you have the prevention piece and you've done everything you can, you've been to their games, you make sure you talk to them, all those sorts of things, right? And sometimes it still happens where they still use. It's a reality. Sometimes substance use disorders present themselves early on in life, and sometimes children just start using, and that's okay. In terms of, you are not a failed parent. There are a lot of aspects to accountability and to using and prevention and all those things. So I'll sort of break that down in a bit. So I was a resident at Rider University. Resident advisor at Rider University. And a lot of what I had come across and a lot of what resident advisors come across is mental health and substance use disorders. Those are sort of the two that come hand in hand. And sometimes we would find random backpacks sitting and we'd pick it up and then we'd hear a clink and we're like, oh no, this has got to be something, right? And most of the time it would be paraphernalia if we heard that sort of clink. But also we would bring that person in, and the assumption that the person who owns the backpack has a substance use disorder is a big one. So you don't want to make any assumptions about that unless they've been to a doctor, unless they've been to a specialist. Diagnosing them with a substance use disorder is not helpful unless you have the empirical evidence behind it in order to sort of sit down with that individual who is using and saying, this is who we are right now. We're going to work towards a better us. We're going to work towards having better habits and all those sorts of things. So first thing is sometimes it just happens, but don't make assumptions when it does happen. Even when you've done everything you could, it also depends on which level you've intervened in, and we will sort of talk about the steps of teen drinking and teen usage. I believe in the next slide. So first thing is when there is accountability, to say what ifs are easy, but they're also dangerous. They're something that is not given. It's not a given thing. What ifs are not given. What ifs are just, the other parts of the reality that you have right now. And being in the reality is much better and it can be harder, but it is much easier in the long run to sort of accept things as they are, figure them out, and get through them as they come along, right? Sort of breaking down things as they go. And I was talking to a good friend, and she basically said that you need to keep communication open, being honest with children about their genetic predispositions, about their family history, and opening up about some of the genetic history, but also talking about some of the stories that may have happened. to sort of say, all right, it's not just me. I'm not the only one that's using in my family. And that doesn't make it right that they're using, but it also helps them understand that even if they are using, they're not subhuman. They're not someone that's outside of help. They're always salvageable. And to let them know that people are salvageable, and sharing those types of family histories can really help them realize and understand that there is something towards the end. There's something that they can work towards, right? So there are quite a lot of different aspects to accountability. Love is not conditional. Love it happens at different levels. My mom sort of put it this way when she was working with our family member that had a substance use disorder. She said, different love is received at different times when children need it. So depending on the type of love that they need, whether it's tough love, whether it's unconditional, whether it's soft love, all of those sorts of things, it depends on the time and the place, and you're the parent that knows the best. So maybe you would know best, that would be the assumption, right? So, but also consequences should not be absolute when you have something with unconditional love. Unconditional love does not mean rules and consequences just sort of dissipate and are thrown out. That's not the reality here. It's that when people use certain things, then it happens. They're A plus B equals C. If you use in the house, then XYZ happens, right? And that can be discussed between you and your child, or a child and a counselor that may be able to help mitigate some of those concerns and conflicts. But also consequences should not be absolute. When they are using, sometimes they don't understand what's going on with them first. So when they come in drunk, or they come in high, or anything like that, talking to them while they're intoxicated doesn't really get to the point. Usually it's best to wait until they're sober, or at least less drunk and less intoxicated. Just sort of talk about the why did you use? And secondly, being honest with them about how you feel and how you feel seeing them like this, and being able to reach out and sort of expressing your feelings as it comes is important as well. And there may be some underlying issues, so the accountability also sort of wavers over into counseling. Counseling can help you be accountable as well. There are many programs such as HiTops, HiFocus. If you're talking about sexuality and gender, there's the Bayard Rustin Center for LGBTQIA youth. There's the crisis intervention centers. We have a lot of resources that I will list later on. It may not always work getting them into counseling, but starting there, if you feel like you're not getting through to them, is truly important, because sometimes we're not professionals. Some of us aren't professional counselors, and we don't have the ability or the techniques to really get them to open up about things that they may really be feeling. So getting them into the help that they need would definitely mitigate some of those concerns. So as we talk about accountability and drug use, we're going to sort of move on to signs of use from several drugs. So first thing I wanted to talk about is there are overlapping signs. There are signs of substance use, and then there's characteristics of youth, which sort of has like a really, really sort of overlap there. So there's secrecy, loss of interest in family, moodiness, rule breaking, change in friends, change in attitude. Honestly, it could be as simple as someone talked about them behind their back during third period right after gym. It's very there. Those are sorts of things that are simple, and the secrecy really is in just them trying to figure out themselves first. And it's a very vulnerable time because they're still trying to figure out themselves. So while they sort of start to figure that out, then it becomes something later on, right? So there are signs of use from several drugs: shifts in moods and personality, sullen, withdrawn, or depressed, less motivated, silent, uncommunicative, hostile, angry, uncooperative, deceitful, or secretive, unable to focus, a sudden loss of inhibitions, hyperactive, or unusually elated. So they have swings from A to B, and it sort of feels like they're going from A to Z. So the sort of seeing whether or not they're going really up or really down sort of helps understand what they're doing and where they're coming from. So there are a lot of different signs, but it just talking to them and not necessarily assuming that they're using until you have solid evidence, until you understand what that is, right? So, what addiction do we see trending these days? We see a lot of addictions trending these days, but we have gaming, computer/internet, marijuana/THC oil, tobacco, vaping, prescription drugs, and alcohol. So all of those things are sort of the top vices that children are pertaining in today, or sort of dabbling in, as we call it. So in particular, I actually, because we do have someone that we consult with, because gaming and computer addiction can be a thing. Having something called an iBoss, I have it here. It is basically what it is. It's a router control, and what it does is basically you can control any device that the child is on at any given time, and you can shut off their device and access to internet and all the pages that they visit. It is very hands-on, and it's something that you can download onto your phone. It is also something to install. It is a pain to install at first to sort of mitigate some of those technical difficulties, just realizing that it's part of the process. But that can be something that sort of mitigates some of the computer and internet and gaming addictions that may be prevalent in children, and where they may also see a lot of their peer pressure happening these days. We also have marijuana and THC, tobacco and vaping. I have in the right-hand corner over here. Prescription drugs. These prescription drugs come from your cabinet, usually from a friend, those kinds of things, to just make sure that you have those prescription drugs and put them in safe spaces, so that, or locks in particular, so that children don't have too much access to them. And alcohol. So alcohol is readily available in cabinets from friends. They could pay someone to buy it for them. We've all seen sort of some of the old school ways of doing that, right? So this is what we are seeing, and it is a little scary, but it is also something that if we know what's happening, if we know that's the kind of stuff they have, and if we see the signs and sort of overlap them with the addiction we're seeing, then we are more readily able to get them help that they need. So there are levels of addiction and substance abuse. The first one is experimental. Now, when we say the first one is experimental, that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that it was the first time that they had seen the substance. It usually just means it's the first time they're trying it. So it could actually be that they've seen it hundreds of times before, and they most likely have, due to subtle advertising and just being around certain people in certain environments. It may not be the introduction. They may have said no many times before they have said yes to a substance. And so this can be seeing adults in the family or family members using. This could be lots of different model behaviors, that sort of thing. So experimental is once or twice use of the substance, and then we move on to the second stage, which is recreational. This is using with family or friends, usually at parties, social settings, and it usually only happens with other people. So recreational is something that you do when you're going out. It's something that enhances your experiences, right? Circumstantial is people who are going through something and use drugs to cope. So this is to make themselves feel better. Usually because they want to escape their own reality, the use becomes more frequent as they are doing it alone, and there is no other stimulus for them, meaning that they're no longer at a party so that there are other people around, so there may be limitations on the drug that they have. Maybe the party ran out of beer, things like that. But if they start to seek it out and use it to cope, so for example, they're studying for an exam and they end up taking loads of caffeine pills to keep them up to study, that's circumstantial. That's helping them cope with their anxiety of being able to, or fear of failing, right? Failing that test in particular. So there are many different ways that circumstantial use can come into play, but really all it is a stage in which children use the drug to cope outside of it just being fun. It's outside of fun. It's more in the, I need this in my life just to sort of get through today. And that doesn't mean that they are using all the time. It may be once a week, it may be once a month, those kinds of things. It could be, oh, I just use Adderall a couple of times to help me focus in school. That's it. It helped me get through school. I got my straight A's. That's it, right? So that's circumstantial. If you have something in, which is the fourth stage, intensified use, this is use increasing over a long period of time. This also could be perpetual symptoms along with it. So sore throat, nosebleeds, irritability, weight loss, weight gain, all those sorts of things. So if you have sort of these symptoms that come along with the intensified use, then, irritability is also another one of them. So we all have those sorts of ideas, right, about what intensified use could look like. But really, intensified use is just more about how long are they seeking it out for? Is it once a day? Is it once every 4 days? What's the intensified use look like? So there are obviously sliding scales because humans are complicated. So that doesn't mean that you jump from 1 to 3, but it could be possible. So, I mean, some people jump from 1 to 3, they start at 2, they go back to 1. So children are complicated, people are complicated. It's not a straight path. Going from X, Y, Z, but it can be. So there are different sorts of stops in between, right? So it just sort of becomes something that they can't handle anymore. And it would become something they can't handle anymore, but it's compulsive. Compulsive is the scariest level to users, especially because there's no control that they have over the drug anymore. The drug controls them. They don't control the drug. And this is where you may think you lost them. But once again, every person is salvageable and every child is worth investing in and making sure that they have a better future. So this definitely would be a stage where they would have to get some help. They would have to have a regimented plan to make sure that they are able to have the best help out there. I do have a video. I thought it was really interesting. I like this video because it's a video about a teenager who started using substances when he was 9. And it wasn't just him. His dad was using as well, and he's surrounded by drug use his whole life, while his brothers were also experimentally using. This influenced how he viewed drugs and thought it was something that was sort of a laissez-faire activity. But because he did start at a very young age, he talks about things that worked for him, and he spent most of his formative years battling his addiction for alcohol and drugs. And he does talk about how he decided to become sober and his start to the road of recovery. So I thought this was a very good video to show. So here we go. Excuse me. There. All right. So, this is going to be about 4 minutes long, but it is a very good watch. And also, this is from a YouTube channel called HiHoKids, and they sort of introduce a lot of different things, but it's usually kids being introduced to something that's unconventional. So they did see once HiHoKids meets a Holocaust survivor, or HiHoKids meets someone who was exonerated from death row. So there are a lot of things that, you sort of are like, oh, that's interesting, that's new. So this is a YouTube channel that you should definitely check out.
I have drank alcohol and done drugs, and I am a kid.
But how old are you?
I'm 16 right now. I was 9 years old when I first smoked marijuana. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
9 years old?
9 years old.
I never saw a young kid like me do that. I've never.
Yeah,
Ever in my life for 7 years, I've never saw that.
Yeah.
What's made you want to take drugs? Did someone tell you, like, bro, this is sick, you should take some, and then you got addicted to it? Or was it like...
So I grew up with a drug addict dad and 2 older brothers that were kind of like experimenting with drugs and stuff. And so I guess I kind of just like grew up to think that it was normal to do drugs and like drink. But,
Okay.
What alcohol tastes like?
alcohol's like, they taste different. They don't taste really that good though.
If it doesn't taste good, why does people even drink it?
For the effect that it gives, like the way it makes people feel. Yeah, are any of your friends experimenting?
Yeah, I have a few friends that start to go down the wrong path.
And how old are you? I didn't ask you.
I'm 15.
15, okay, yeah.
did you like take a drug and then go higher and higher up the?
Yeah, so I started with weed and drinking, then started eating mushrooms and doing acid, then got into like the powders, like ecstasy and all that.
Did you feel good when you did it?
Yeah, to be honest, I did. It started out very fun, just getting high and drunk with friends. At times, it made me feel very giggly. It made me laugh a lot. Made me, I guess, like comfortable and relaxed.
Were you ever put in any dangerous situations?
Some. I mean, I was going to parties. There's some dangerous people there and stuff. Like, people were getting stabbed and threatened. I got threatened to get shot a few times. And, like, I did stupid stuff. Like, I climbed this school roof and jumped off of it. I, like, almost broke my back.
What made you decide to become sober?
Life became unmanageable. I had been dropped out of school for a while. I, like, punched my best friend in the face and gave him a black eye, and that felt terrible when I realized what I had done. And just like I like looked at myself in the mirror, and I looked at someone I didn't even really recognize. That hit me. So
When you stopped, were you like, hooray, I stopped?
the first time I stopped, yeah. And they call it like the pink cloud, where you're just like, life's great and you don't need alcohol. But then I fell back into drinking alcohol again, and then I tried to get sober again, and it was a lot harder the second time. Are you guys addicted to anything? Is there anything that you feel like you can't live without?
Toys.
Toys?
Candy. No, don't take that. My stuffy dog.
Stuffy dog?
Yeah, for some reason, I can't sleep without him. So, it's kind of addiction.
Doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah.
What do you recommend for like people that their friends like are maybe going down the wrong path?
I recommend like not being judgmental. The people that like stood out to me the most during my use were like just people that like genuinely cared about me and weren't like, don't do drugs, but like more just like, I care about you and like I see you going down this path and it doesn't look like a good one.
Who was your biggest supporter?
I'm gonna say my dad. Yeah. Because he also got sober right around a little before I did too, so. A big thing is this recovery high school I'm going to. So it's a high school where
They help you recover.
they help you recover. Yeah. Yep.
Instead of like math, science, they just.
Well, no, so it's actually a school and we still have all those subjects.
Okay, so I sort of shared that, and I went a little over because I just love the kids' reactions. I like that they're so innocent and they're non-judgmental, and they sort of look at something and they're like, all right, this is what it is. I'm being presented with this, but also I'll be respectful in the way I ask questions and also be respectful in the way that I have these sorts of responses. So maybe also sometimes sharing your predispositions and genetic codes can also come from a family member that had been now on the other side, but did go through something like that. So to sort of have those experiences and understand that sometimes things are the way they are. Some people don't see that's what it is. And yes, thank you, Melissa. She said, I love how he recognized that addictions can be more than drugs and alcohol. Yes, addictions are more than drugs and alcohol. Drugs and alcohol are just one part of it, right? There's so many other things. There's so much other stuff that you can be addicted to, that sort of releases that dopamine chemical that makes you addicted to it, right? So I just thought that was a good video, and I think everyone should use it. Just a really good thing. So mental illness and substance abuse. I did want to touch upon this just because there is a correlation. Mental illness sometimes looks similar to using substances like the lethargy, the depression, the anxiety, all of those things. Especially when people use marijuana, they tend to be calm when they use it. That's one of the common side effects of using marijuana. But right after, once they get off marijuana and it's no the THC usually, and it's no longer in their system, they start to get really anxious. So their anxiety levels shoot up and shoot down depending on how their body reacts to the cannabinoids that are in their systems, right? So there's a lot of stuff to this. Mental illnesses do look similar to using substances, but using substances can also be a coping skill for their mental illnesses. So for example, if you do have anxiety, some people recommend marijuana so that it calms you down. If you just want to be a little bit more fun and you want to let loose, people say, well, just have a sip of alcohol. It helps you sort of understand that a lot of teenagers see these sorts of drugs and substances being floated around, and it's something that they sort of are reaching out and they just catch on to something and they start using it because sometimes they just don't know how to cope with their mental illness. I also touched upon marijuana. It especially may have links to psychosis depending on when you started, the frequency of use, and the formation of your brain. It does have a very visceral reaction to our brains and bodies. There is something here that says how marijuana affects the brain. It said in the study that was taken, I believe, in 2016, it said among patients with moderate to high severity dual diagnosed disorders, treatment's outcomes were improved when their drug abuse treatment was supplemented with targeted mental health care. So when you are addicted or you have a substance use disorder, targeting the mental health issues and what can be perceived as problems alongside it, and even in supplement to it or in place of it, then that really helps mitigate some of the urges to use. I do have that study. It is listed in the resource slide at the end of the presentation if anyone wants to look at that. According to NIMH.nih.gov, 20.2 million adults in the US had a substance use disorder, and 7.9 million had both a substance use disorder and another mental illness. So we know that addiction is a mental illness, but we also know that mental illness and substance use kind of go hand in hand because people do look to mitigate some of their anxiety, stress, PTSD, all of that stuff outside of that as well. So it is something that is a vice, and it is something people use to feel better. And so let's say, for example, they've gone through rehab, there are things going on, right? And they've come to a place where they're finally able to be substance free or use very little of a substance. There are signs of withdrawal. They will have headaches. They may be constantly sleeping. They can also be finding other vices. So, for example, the person in my family in particular switched from alcohol to tobacco, heroin to alcohol to tobacco. So there's definitely a gradient of what people perceive as better addictions, but addiction to vices in general isn't necessarily good for your body. But this person argues, well, if I'm addicted to tobacco, at least I'm not addicted to heroin. So there are definite levels here to how people cope with their addictions. They may be shaky, nervous, itchy, heightened anxiety, bursts of anger, may say hurtful things towards you and may be hurtful towards you. And depending on how severe the withdrawal symptoms are, it is possible for them to be physically violent, worst case scenario. I know someone in particular who works in the field of social services, and she had a child who had a very bad computer addiction. And when the parent decided to do cold turkey, take out the computer from their child's room, the child tried to push the parent down the stairs. That I don't foresee that happening to everyone. I don't foresee that being one of the common side effects of withdrawal, but it is also a possibility. It is something because their body is at an extreme. It is possible. So when children are going through withdrawal, when their body, from what their body is used to, it can become a problem. So making sure that you're mitigating a lot of those symptoms and a lot of those concerns is truly important. I do have here a YouTube video. It's an expert on heavy teen drug use. I'm not going to play it just because they really do talk about heavy teen drug use, and it's not applicable to everyone. But I will say that if you want the video, I will definitely share it in the chat or share the slides with you. But he has a lot of good things to say. He's certified in, teaching about this sort of thing. So it is a good resource to have. I do have here, you may be saying, all right, I sort of know what drug use looks like. I sort of know what substance use and its side effects look like. How do I figure this out, right? And let's say, for example, there is just mental illness and there is substance use, or maybe there's both present. There are quite a lot of resources in the area. There's Second Floor, which is counseling through phone and text for youth. There's hotlines varied based on the issue and varied based on the age. High focus centers, they do inpatient and outpatient programs for a wide range of things in Mercer County. They are highly coveted and they do require a lengthy screening and diagnosis process, but they are very good at what they do and they have very good turnout. So I highly suggest those for students, especially, or children especially, that have mental illness and substance abuse together. The Bayard Rustin Center in Princeton for sexuality and counseling related to gender and sexuality. So if that is part of what helps them cope, that is a good center to look for. The Mercer Council, which is where I'm from, on alcoholism and drug addiction, all of the prevention educators know something and quite a lot about vices and resources. And if we don't know, we know people who know. So reaching out to us could be something very helpful as well. Physicians' offices may help with formative information, talking about the science parts of it, the empirical evidence, and any sort of things that they're saying. Well, if children say they're not listening to you, at least they could listen to a professional like a doctor or a counselor or something like that. So physicians' offices could be a good alternative. StopAddiction.us has quite a list of resources. And I also have here mercersources.net/health services. Many resources are listed there as well. They do talk about a lot of different things. And I didn't want to list them all because it is an extensive list, but they do have quite a bit of resources there. So I do want to close with saying, you come here because you're concerned. You clicked on the title because you said, all right, what do I do now? First thing, you're doing the best you can. And children and drug use, all of it happens to anyone. And things can just happen, even if you're saying, if I had just had one more dinner with them, if I asked them one more time how they were doing, things like that. The what ifs only perpetuate the sort of guilt that we have, and possibly seeking counseling could be part of that experience as well. That if you're going through these things where you feel like shame and failure, all of those things, counseling could be a good solution for you to sort of flesh out some of those things. But also knowing that you do know them best and coming up with an action plan with the right professionals and consideration of the child. Sticking to what would help them is super important. It is the best thing you can do for your child, but also know that you're here to learn, you're here to share, and you are not a failure if things didn't turn out the way you thought, and that's just what it is. And I mean failed in the sense that you're not a failure, but the situation just seems like it's failing. But what is wonderful about life is that it just sort of grows and moves up and down as we go. So, which means if you've been down, then you can also go up. There's a very high possibility that you will go up, and to sort of close out and also to say that accountability is super important. The accountability slide, I think I took the most consideration on putting what I needed on there, because accountability is the glue that ties commitment to results. So if you have children that are sliding back on their efforts, if you have parents who are sort of being lackadaisical about how they implement the rules and consequences, then there won't be room for improvement. There won't be improvement if there is no accountability. But also saying that if you do feel like anything, I have a quote here that is from extremelygoodparenting.com. I actually follow them. And they say, I have yet to meet a parent who hasn't failed at some point, but the great parents are the ones who learn from their mistakes. So that is something to keep in mind. That is something to figure out as you go. And you are doing the best you can. And that's all we can ask for, right? So thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. I have the resources listed here if anyone would like them. And we are good to go. That's it. Thank you for being here. All right, bye.